Welcome to Eat, Sleep, Wine, Repeat, a podcast for all you wine lovers who, if you're like me, just cannot get enough of the good stuff. I'm Janina, your host, brand ambassador, wine educator, and sommelier. So stick with me as we dive deeper into this ever-evolving, wonderful world of wine. And wherever you are listening to this, cheers to you. Hello, wine friends. Today's episode, we're talking Bordeaux, but not in this intimidating textbook way. Very much in a lived experience storytelling way. So in this episode, you're going to learn why provenance and traceability matter so much when buying fine wine and what that actually means behind the scenes. We're going to be unpacking whether Bordeaux classifications from first growth all the way through to Cru Bourgeois still matter today. And we'll also explore where the real excitement is in Bordeaux. And you're going to get some wine recommendations that offer great value. And because I know so many of you love traveling to wine regions as much as drinking them, we'll also finish with recommendations for where you should actually go if you only have 2 days in Bordeaux. Now, my guest today is someone who's genuinely shaped the modern wine trade. Michael Saunders is Group CEO of Coterie Holdings. This is a group that's bringing together some of the most respected fine wine businesses in the world. And they have this aim of creating a stronger, more transparent and more enduring future for fine wine. So you probably may recognize names within the group such as Lay & Wheeler or Hallgarten and Noven Wines, WineFi, Global Wine Solutions, Lynx Concept and the Wine Experience. But Michael's story in wine goes way back. He co-founded Bend & Wine in 1982 and led the business as CEO until 2016. He built that into the UK's largest independent wine distributor. He's also a former chairman of the Wines and Spirits Trade Association and has decades of experience scaling businesses and watching the fine wine world evolve from the inside. But more than that, he is somebody with stories that today I get to share with you all. And I recently had the opportunity to attend one of Hallgarten's wine Cellar Series tastings, an exceptional experience curated by Robert Mathias, currently the youngest master of wine in the world. And it's featuring extraordinary wines with impeccable provenance, which we'll talk about, including first growth Bordeaux. And yes, I got to taste wines like Mouton Rothschild, so not exactly an everyday Tuesday. So with En Primeur fresh in everyone's minds, I wanted to sit down with Michael to hear his perspective, understand what's changing in Bordeaux, and just get some of those stories along the way. And finally, stay until the end because I am going to take a little time to explain Cru Bourgeois classification. It is one of those Bordeaux topics I realised I've never properly covered on the podcast before. So pour yourself something delicious, get comfortable, and enjoy the episode. Michael, you literally spent decades at the very top of the wine trade. I don't want to be, inflating your ego, so I'll stop there. But you have seen, you're welcome. You're welcome. That's it. That's all you get. But you've seen Bordeaux evolve over those years, over these different eras. So I mean, before we go into the journey further, can you remember a bottle? Is there a vintage? Is there a moment early on that made you go, yeah, okay, Bordeaux's truly special for me?
Yeah, there is actually. I'm probably going to surprise you, but you're right. I did join the wine trade a hell of a long time ago. So you just made me feel really old this morning. That's great. Thank you. But my first job in the wine trade was in New York in 1981. Believe it or not, I worked for a business called Sherry Lehman. I was not allowed to work on the floor because I was too young to sell alcohol. So I was upstairs in an office using this rather pompous accent of mine to sell vintage port, of which I knew absolutely nothing, but I was given a script to read out. And while I was there and I was thinking about should I stay in the trade, I went to stay with a family friend of my parents in Greenwich, Connecticut. And we were chatting on the Friday night and he was asking about what I was doing. And he said, well, he was a huge wine collector, like a serious wine collector. And he said, I'm going to teach you something about wine, young man. And I was like, okay, what's that? He said, tomorrow morning, I want you on the terrace over there at like 10:30, 11 o'clock. I went, okay. And so we sat down and he pulled out a bottle and he said, this is how to appreciate wine. And he pulled out a bottle of Yquem 1967, which, as you know, is one of the great wines of Yquem of all time. I know it's not a red Bordeaux, but it is one of the classic Bordeaux. And we sat there and we just discussed the wine. We discussed what was going on in 1967. We discussed life, and he wouldn't let me leave until we finished the bottle. And that was that was before drinks time. And the lesson he was teaching me is don't take wine too seriously. It's a drink to be shared, to be enjoyed, not just be looked at and touched and revered and resold when you think you made some money. And it really has stayed with me all my life. And I use that example to myself sometimes. If you do get too sort of theoretical about wine, it was a great lesson in life as well as wine, actually.
I mean, how amazing. I did not expect you to say that. And who gets to start their proper wine journey on Château d'Yquem?
I know.
This, for anybody who is not aware, is basically the ultimate sweet wine of the world. And also, can I just double check, was this 10:30 in the morning that he cracked open?
But he did it deliberately to teach, to say, don't take it all too seriously. Don't follow the rules. The whole thing of white wine with fish or red wine with meat. He's like, just enjoy it for what it is. And actually, I can build on that. My sort of Bordeaux love really, really happened with me. I took a small time out for 6 months, went to work for the legendary Anthony Barton in Bordeaux at Château and Longo at Barton.
Okay.
And he became a great friend of mine over the time I worked there. He was an amazing guy. And one day there's just him and I in the office, and he gave me this key. And I said, what's that? He said, take this key, go down to the cellar, which was famous for having a huge collection of old bottles which hadn't been drunk during the war. And he said, get a bottle and you and I are going to share it over lunch. And I was like, okay. So that's saying me going to Pauillac to get a sandwich for lunch, something grotty, all I could afford. So I went down to the cellar, came back, I got down there and you saw all these wines going back hundreds of years. I was thinking, God, what do I choose? So this is in 1985. So I came back up with a 1970 Léoville, something I thought was going to be respectful, not madly expensive, but, not diving into the ancient history. So I brought it up and I put it in front of him and he looked at me and raised one rather laconic eyebrow and said to me, Michael, he said, I want you to go and get a serious bottle of wine. It's for you and I. So I came back up, went downstairs, came back up with, and I'm guessing now it's a Longo Barton 1966. So I came back up, put it in front of him, and he raised two laconic eyebrows and said, I told you to get a serious bottle of wine, Michael. So he said, this is your last go. Otherwise, I'm going to have to do it. And I just can't be bothered to go, you're young, you go and do it. So I went downstairs and I came up with a bottle from the 19th century. I honestly don't remember what the wine was, but I know it was 19th century. I know it was absolutely pristinely delicious. And he didn't want to talk about the wine. What he wanted to do was talk about what was happening in the world when that wine was made. And that taught me another lesson as well. So we were talking about Napoleonic times, it was sort of extraordinary. And again, that put wine in context. And we finished the bottle and had a very snoozy afternoon. But it was something, again, I'll never forget that situation, the person, the wine, and the whole ethos of anchoring wine in history, not just in the wine itself.
You literally have, you summed it all up in that. I love that. What a way to learn about wine, just having to go down.
I know. Wasn't I lucky?
Into a cellar.
He had an unbelievably good sense of humor as well. So, I mean, just as a tangent from that, when I went to work there as an stagiaire, the first day he sent me out into the vineyards. So I had to do a whole day of sort of pruning the vines. And I came back at the end of the day, said, how was that? And I said, I'm not doing that again. That was simply awful and, frankly, quite boring. So the next day he sent me down to the cellar, which was one of the very old cellars in Bordeaux, full of sort of, you know what it's like. It's damp and it's pretty, and they were racking. So I had to haul barrels around all the day. So I came back up at the end of the day and he said, what do you think about that? And he looked at me and he said, I don't think you like that either. And I went, no, I'm not doing that again either. So he said, what are we going to do with you for the months ahead? So at the end, he had a huge partner's desk. I sat opposite him and just got involved in the sales and the hospitality at Château Margaux, which was legendary again. So he and I became, we did so many different things that weren't to do with the business. I really miss him to this day. He was a big influence on my life, actually.
That's incredible. So actually, you were a cellar rat. You got involved in the viticulture and the winemaking side.
Don't sound so surprised. Yes.
No, but it's incredible that then quite clearly you were like, no, actually, the business side is what excited you the most when it came to wine. And he was okay.
Well, I have to confess, unlike most people in the industry, I've never taken a wine exam in my life. So I'm guilty as charged. Yeah.
Well, I actually really appreciate you saying that because, as you know, there's a broad spectrum of different people listening to this podcast. And so many people love wine, but I think feel, I haven't got my WSET qualification. I haven't done an exam. Therefore, my opinion's not valid, or I couldn't possibly get into the wine world. And I'm like, if you want to, you actually can. Yes, the exams give structure. Yes, the exams give some gravitas. It can make it easier, but it does not mean that you can't be part of the wine industry because you haven't got an exam.
So I'm going to build on that. So I think that WSET and Michelle and her team do a fantastic job, and I'm a huge supporter, and I put a lot of my team through it. I put a lot of our customers' teams through it. So I'm in no way denigrating. But the wine trade needs people who have other skills apart from wine. Wine skills are everywhere. I mean, compared to my day, we get people coming to interview us, talk to us who know unbelievable amounts of wine about wine, probably a lot more than me, frankly, but definitely a lot more than me. But what they don't have is a clear view of how to help a business. They don't have a clear view on really how to make wine relevant. And all my career, I've wanted to try and break down the barriers of wine. I want wine to be accessible, to be enjoyed. So you don't need to know anything. All you need to know is, do you like it or don't you? And then if you're curious, you can decide why you like it and why you don't. And you know this, Janina, you've done it. You've done it for years. But I think it's the whole idea of curiosity that really matters. And the analogy I'd use is, you go to an art gallery. You don't need to be an expert on every artist. Of course, if your curiosity gets picked and you decide Rembrandt's your thing, you're going to go and find out more information, learn about it, and get more educated so you can get underneath the skin of the picture. And wine's exactly the same. And it mustn't be intimidating. It's got to be enjoyed. It's got to be part of one's lifestyle. And I think that it's still something that the wine trade hasn't really met face on. And here am I 40 plus years later, still agonizing about the same need to bring people to have the confidence to just enjoy it.
Well, thank you. You using the word curiosity. If only I could give myself a penny or a pound for every time I use the word curiosity, because it really, truly is. I think everyone listening, how many times do I mention this? I just want people to be curious. Okay, we're going to talk about Bordeaux because Hallgarten Wines sources wines for the Cellar Series. But Bordeaux is often seen as a very exclusive wine region. It's for the people that know about wines because obviously, as we know, the top end is very expensive. What do you say about that?
I would say that is Bordeaux's biggest Achilles heel. And I suppose because of what I said just now, that I did my training in Bordeaux, it's always been a cause célèbre for me. It's always something that I've tried to get people to really think beyond what they read, that it is exclusive, because it is at the top end. Obviously, I can't afford it. I used to be able to because it used to be quite cheap back in the 80s. It's not anymore. But throughout the different price spectrums of Bordeaux, there is something for everybody now. I mean, at the very basic end, it's good wine. But compared to 20 years ago, wine from Bordeaux that aren't too expensive are delicious. Why? Two reasons, effectively. One is global warming, so you don't have that awful green stalky flavor that you might just have got the tail end of. Secondly, science has improved dramatically. So the capability of winemakers to use the equipment and techniques that they've got now has changed it completely. So, you can get, and we'll probably talk about some of the chateau later, you can get delicious wines at 15, 20 pounds that will frankly knock other things out of the park. But one of my evangelical causes here is to get people trying these wines again, because Bordeaux is stuck in a rush of I can't afford it and it's exclusive, and if I don't know enough about it, it's I can't choose it. Wrong. Try it and you'll get what I'm talking about. I mean, they are fabulous now. There's hardly any idea of such thing as a really bad vintage. They're vintages with more complexity, but a bad vintage in the old days was truly awful. That doesn't really happen anymore. And that's so, I think they're very accessible, and people have got to change their perception because there are wines of brilliance.
Well, let's see how you do on the rest of this episode then. Let's.
Is that a challenge or
Oh, yes, it is.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Okay,
I knew this wasn't going to be that easy.
So we have the Cellar Series.
Yeah.
What makes a wine worthy of inclusion in the Cellar Series?
So I have to go back one, if I may. The whole idea was to reconnect Bordeaux Chateau with the hospitality trade, because I felt in the boom times, frankly, and I've said this to them, the Bordeaux Chateau in general made the wine, sold the wine en primeur, did a few events, did occasional consumer tastings, and then they sold everything. So they rubbed their hand and they went back, if I was being really naughty, went back to Bordeaux and counted their money and decided what new toys buy for the winery, or how to extend their chateau, or how to, and I'm sure you've been to Bordeaux and you've seen, there's hardly a pebble out of place in the main. But that's an illusion now. So I had a dream of bringing a connectivity back between sommeliers or selectors to the Bordeaux chateaus, so that the Bordelais explain their wines not just through price and vintage, but through winemaking techniques, through what the wine tastes like, what they did to make the wines taste as it did. So the first point was to make sure that the chateau were interested in reconnecting with the hospitality trade. And it wasn't easy, frankly, to begin with. I had this dream about, I don't know, it was well pre-COVID. And the chateaus I asked, they said no to begin with. We don't need this. And I was like, yes, you do. And so it took me a while to find chateaux that were willing to come into the project. And then suddenly it started to happen. So there are two or three, I suppose, elements to this. One is the chateau wanting to participate, because it is more of an effort. It's not just sales. It's about marketing, visiting. It's about spending time in market, educating people on the wines. So there are three things really, Janina. One is the chateaus wanting to participate, because it's more of an effort. We don't just place an order and then ship the wine. They've got to get involved in tasting, in training, in visits, all the things that wine producers do from around the rest of the world. Secondly, they've got to have a stock of mature vintages that are ready to drink sitting in their chateau, because the whole purpose of this is having wines that have been matured in the place they were made without having moved. Thirdly, Robert's got to like it. So the person that I think you've met him, Robert Mathias.
Yes.
He's a master of wine. He's annoyingly young. He's 31. He's the youngest master of wine in the world. But he and I have worked on this project together for many, many years. So he is the selector and negotiator. So that's sort of how we get to it.
How do you two, or our superstar Robert, determine when a wine has reached its peak drinking window, or like it's the perfect moment to then bring it to the UK?
Yeah, so this is quite easy, actually. First of all, once we've got a chateau to agree, we then discuss with them what they think they have in stock that would be perfect for drinking now. And in the hospitality industry, as you more than anybody are aware, rarely do you have the time to let the wine breathe or before it's ordered. So it has to be a vintage that you can uncork, perhaps decant, perhaps not, and sell straight away. So often the vintages are not the very, very famous ones. So the vintages, going back to what I said, they're mostly pretty good now. You can get amazing value with in this project with 12s, 13s, 16s tasting delicious now, 17s underrated. So we're often using wines that are seen not to be the great vintages, because the great vintage wines, they need a lot of preparation. They need time to breathe. They need time to sort of work their magic, which isn't always possible unless it's pre-ordered before you get to the restaurant. So there's a number of different factors here, but primarily the wines are delicious. And we hear this over and over again. In fact, one of our hospitality clients last night did a tasting, and it's for a very big wedding. And they chose the Lapard Aubaye, the second one of Aubaye, which is part of our Cellar Series. And I got a note overnight from the owner of that hospitality company saying they couldn't believe how delicious the wine was, how good the value was, and it just hit what they needed spot on, and they just sort of it's music to my ears. You know, I'm a salesman. I love to sell wine, but when somebody gets what you're trying to do, there's an extra thrill.
Well, I mean, okay, you've just said, first of all, the wines are delicious, tick, okay, there we go. But also it's about finding value. I've also already mentioned maybe the intimidation factor. Because Bordeaux does feel like that for many wine lovers because of all the classifications and the hierarchy system. So maybe could you just explain from your perspective, like how the system works from the first growths down to, you know, Cru Bourgeois and standard Bordeaux? What does any of it matter to you right now? Where do you come from when looking at bringing these wines into the UK?
Okay, so there is, I'm sure everybody listening knows, there's the 1855 classification, and that only applies to the left bank of Bordeaux. So going down Saint-Émilion, Pauillac, Saint-Émilion, Margaux, down to to the Grave. Yes, indeed. Well done. And then so that was, that has only changed once when Mouton Rothschild was elevated to first growth, I think in 1972, from memory, I can't. So that sort of works as a hierarchy. So we like to have some representation from each of the classified growths, because if you think about what it looks like on a restaurant list, to have a couple of first growths tick, to have a couple of second growths tick, and so it does give some sort of gravitas to the presentation of a list. So, it still works in that sense. The reason it doesn't completely work is on the right bank, there's nothing like that. So we need to make sure that we have, great to good in Pomerol, in Saint-Émilion, where again, the classification system is sort of slightly less clear than it was, because not everybody participates anymore. So it is more complicated, but we like to have a broad representation. We like to have a broad representation from all the different appellations. So we need to have, a good smattering from everywhere, so we can curate a really nice representation from the entire huge region of Bordeaux. And I sometimes wonder if everybody realizes how big Bordeaux is. I'm organizing a trip for somebody at the end of June, and we have to go from, and I'm gonna drop names now, from Château Margaux, which is on the right bank, all the way up to Cos d'Estanel for the next visit. That's a good 2 hour plus drive, and so the distances are quite big. It is a vast region.
Okay, so we've talked about the fact that there are all these classification systems, less so on the right bank.
Yeah.
Where do you personally think the most excitement or individuality in Bordeaux is right now? Is it first and second growths? Is it Leland de Pomerol? Is it Cru Bourgeois estates? Is it somewhere else?
I wish I could give you a simple answer to that.
Well, give me a long answer.
I'm going to give you a long answer, yeah, because it is a really fascinating time. Robert and I were in Bordeaux for the En Primeur tastings a few weeks ago in April. And so we covered the whole of Bordeaux in some depth, tasted hundreds of wines of the 2025 vintage, which, by the way, is ridiculously good. I was privileged to start off with a Vieux Château Satin 25. And I'd heard rumors that it was good. I just don't remember anything so erythral in all my career. The vintage is the easiest to taste I've ever done. It really was, not uniformly, but pretty much everywhere. Completely brilliant. Anyway, what's going on in Bordeaux is they're really thinking very deeply about how to do what I suppose has been happening in Burgundy for years and years and years, is doing a lot of plot selection rather than just having wine selection. So the example I'm going to give you at the top end is the amazing Château Margaux, which has changed out of all recognition from what it was 20 years ago to now one of the most brilliant wines of Bordeaux. And there they are doing some real selective terrace wines as well, which is changing the perception of their wines, because within Château Margaux's vineyards, they've got different terraces, which they're making differently, and they taste completely different, albeit they're all brilliant, but they're all from Margaux, they're all from Saint-Émilion, and wow, it's good. The other end, the other side of Bordeaux, the collection I always think shows what can be done in the right bank is the wines of the brilliant Denis Durantou, who sadly is no longer with us, but his daughter runs the business now. And you've got a Côte Castillon, which is Château Montlandry. You've got a Lalande de Pomerol, which is Château Cruzel. You've obviously got his great wine from Pomerol, Église Clinée. But what they have there is a truly majestic capture of the different terroir within that small area of Bordeaux. All the wines taste different. All the wines, pretty much every vintage tastes brilliant. By the way, pretty much every En Primeur, I buy most of their wines and have them bottled in double magnums because they're not expensive. Well, Église Clean is, of course. But if you get Cruzel or Montlandry and you have it bottled in magnums, double magnums, they're affordable, and I can afford to put them on the table with my mates and drink. A lot of my friends drink volume as well as top end wines, and you just get wines that are absolutely fabulous. So I'm about to knock into the 2016s of those, which I bought all those years ago. I can't wait. They're going to be absolutely delicious. And even my friends who know about wine think, oh, that's not very expensive, in a slightly pompous way. They will absolutely love these wines because they just taste so brilliantly good.
So is this your example right now, your personal recommendation of a Bordeaux wine that's really expressing terroir and is possibly where people should try? Or do you have a few more recommendations, just a few chateaux that people should put on their list?
Well, I think those wines from Durantou are fantastic. I mean, I could go on forever, but what I said earlier is that the winemaking techniques have improved so much that, what might be regarded as less important chateaux are making brilliant wines. So another example I'll give, slightly low down, if any of your listeners are looking for a value 2025 to buy, there's a chateau in Pauillac called Grand Puy-Lacoste. Their 2025 is one of my value picks of the year. It's utterly delicious, and you'll get it for, I know it sounds a lot, but you'll get it for around 30 quid on your table by the time it arrives. You've got from the owners of Béchevel, you've got Chateau Beaumont in the Haute-Médoc, which is a Cru Bourgeois. You mentioned Cru Bourgeois just now. Again, you get fantastic value from that, and you get all these skills of their winemaking team for the much more expensive wines expressed in Chateau Beaumont. You get the team that are involved with Lynch-Barge. So Jean-Charles Caz, he's got some fantastic wines in his portfolio that aren't always very expensive. So I think there's so much to play with that it's much easier now. It's much easier. So my recommendation to any listeners who want to start, find some wines that are showing brilliantly. We did a big tasting of the 2016, so 10 year on, for the Lane Wheeler customers. Lane Wheeler is one of the companies in our portfolio. The wines are brilliant. They're not just good. They're exceptional. And there wasn't a bad wine at that tasting. And that covers everything from first growth down to more junior wines. So here it is from me. If you see a bottle of 2016, try it.
Love that. Okay, tick, you've given us already a whole load of wineries or chateaus that have several different wineries in their portfolio to go and check out. 2016, great. I know you also mentioned like 2012, 13, 16, 17 are drinking well in restaurants. Is there any other vintages that make you go, oh, either from a, do you know what, if you've got the money, buy it and cellar it, or from a, this is drinking well now, other than 16?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a really good run at Bordeaux, so there's plenty to go at, and honestly, there's a lot of information on the web on all these things.
Yeah, this is true.
I'm not sort of preaching anything that's not very, very visible to all. So, vintages are dangerous because some of the vintages I mentioned, like 12s, 13s, 14s, they've all been just dismissed as bad vintages. Well, they're not a great vintage, but the wines are drinking absolutely beautifully. And of course, a lot of the critics go back, years on and go, well, maybe we were a bit harsh on those wines because they've evolved into very pretty, very luxurious, very rounded wines, but they're not going to hit the heights of one of the very, very grand vintages. So, the grand vintages after 16, 18s were good, 19s were good, 21s less so, 22s brilliant, so there's a lot to go at. And that's what makes it all really fascinating to me.
Well, you said about people, maybe they tasted the wines, they've already said nah, and they've kind of put it aside. That may be that they were tasting En Primeur before.
Exactly.
Time has been able to showcase the beauty that was maybe within that couldn't first be seen. So let's maybe talk about En Primeur, because I have talked about this before on one podcast, but I think everyone's experience of En Primeur is very different.
Yep.
And Bordeaux system is just crazy and confusing. So you were out there only a few months ago. You obviously said the 2025 vintage is beautiful.
Yep.
But how does it work? When you turn up.
Well, the trade turns up. There's 1 week where the trade actually goes over 2 weeks now. The trade turn up and we all run around like crazy, tasting every wine, forming an opinion. And as you say, they're unfinished wines. So the chateau each put in, they make their blend to show what their final wine will look like. You've got to have some experience to do it. I mean, again, you were so ageist earlier. So I've been in the trade a long time. I've done these. I've done this tasting a lot. So, you've got terms of reference in one's mind. So you do the tastings, and then over time, the Bordeaux then release their volumes, release the pricing. And we're in the middle of that right now. So yesterday, Château Margaux came out. Last week, not much because it was Vinexpo Hong Kong. The week before, Lafite came out. And so, it used to be quite quick. Now it goes over about 2 months. So then they offer it out to the négociants. The négociants offer it out to people like me. We then offer it out to our customers. And the point of En Primeur is to get an allocation of a wine and know it's yours before it hits the bottle. And then you can track its provenance. You can be silly like me and have it bottled in very large bottles. I like inexpensive wine, have it bottled in huge bottles because I like a bit of drama and a bit of theatre and around wine. And, it's not as the En Primeur game isn't as big as it used to be many years ago because it has got more expensive. When I was, I remember my first En Primeur campaign, I hate to say this, but was the 1981 vintage, which wasn't a great vintage. But you look at the prices then, because when we moved, as you know, out of my old business, I sold the business and had to move out of our office. I found our first campaign leaflet. And it was just literally a piece of paper with a list of wines and prices on. The first gross, so Lafite, Aubryon, Mouton, Margaux, etc. They were £120 a dozen.
Wow.
You just can't imagine that in today's world. And so things have changed diametrically, but it's still a great way for collectors to secure. If they, a lot of our customers like having the same wine vintage after vintage. They follow it. A lot of them like to build their collections this way, and that's how it works.
And I have to say, that is one of the great things about you saying from the off, actually, I want to secure this amount of wine. Because just like you said, you can choose, do you want it in 75 CL or do you go bigger? You can choose the amount of wine you have.
Well,
and
you
that's
could go
something
smaller, but that's not in my world. That's not in my wheelhouse. A half bottle of wine doesn't really go very far for me.
No, I think go big or go home. I agree.
Exactly.
Why not?
Well, I don't know if any of, I'm sure a lot of people have been to the amazing hedonism wines, which I have no involvement at all, but hedonism wine in Davis Street. And you can see some proper big bottles of wine, of Bordeaux in there. You can see 22-litre bottles, which, they're not easy. You can't pick them up. You need two people to pick them up. So I think theatre is really good. I think theatre brings wine a little bit of fun to wine, which otherwise, as I go right back to the beginning, can be a bit stuffy, a bit serious. And, if you go into a room, a private party and you've got double magnums on the table, it's fun, and it just elevates the whole enjoyment.
I totally agree. And actually, funny enough, bringing it round into a full circle, mentioning Hedonism, the wine store. So for anyone who doesn't live in London or in England, this is near Green Park, everyone, but look up Hedonism. They have, unless they've changed it, the whole Château de Chem wall.
Yep.
Don't they?
Yeah, it's amazing.
And the fact that a lot of sweet wine naturally comes in half bottles. The size that you don't like.
Oh gosh, I've labelled myself, or now you're labelling me. Thank you very much.
Oh, there we go. It's happened. But obviously, half bottles when it comes to sweet wine makes a lot of sense because really, unlike enjoying a few glasses, you may only want a little sip or two. So small bottles, great, but there are some really huge bottles of Château de Chem, and I can only imagine the kind of party you must have to just open up a Jeroboam of Château de Chem and be sharing it around with all your friends. My gosh.
Well, I think, Janina, you've been in hospitality. I was in a very smart hotel in Asia quite recently, and they do Yquem out of a very large bottle. And they said to me they're the largest seller of Jeroboams of Yquem in the world. And you saw this in the way the head of wine was working the room with this enormous bottle. It brought it all alive. And obviously it's not a cheap glass of wine to buy, but people were absolutely loving it. And you just thought, wow, this is fine wine being sold well, being poured brilliantly in perfect glassware with a sense of theatre, and a guy who was so motivated and knew far more about the wine than I did. He sort of tested me, and I threw in the towel rather quickly. If it was a boxing match, I don't think we lasted like 10 seconds. I did 10 seconds in the ring. But I was truly impressed the way they went about it. And actually, I prefer not to say the name of the restaurant. We just had a restaurant in London, which I was kindly taken to by the team behind Opus One a couple of weeks ago. And they want to put Opus One by the glass from Jeroboam. I mean, isn't that nice?
Oh, that is fun.
So,
you're not mentioning the restaurant name?
I am not going to.
Oh, we can Google.
Well, yeah. It's not for me.
No, fair enough. Oh my God, no, I totally agree. I love this because actually it just shows no matter what wine you have, there are ways to enjoy it even more. And I think that actually leads me into, I want you to take us to Bordeaux. You have been there. You've effectively, not studied. You've done your stage there.
Yeah.
You learnt so much from Bordeaux. So you've quite clearly travelled all over the left bank, all over the right bank. I mean, give us listeners, what do we need to see? Where do we need to go if we had a few days in Bordeaux? Are there wine bars that just stick in your memory?
So, first of all,
let's go.
First of all, Bordeaux city centre has changed completely from the old days. It's modern, it's clean, it's really friendly towards visitors. It's got a great tram system. It's got wine bars everywhere. It's got a huge plethora of restaurants, not just French. So I went to, that week we were in Bordeaux with Robert, we did a big tasting in a Japanese restaurant there. It was utterly delicious. And in that restaurant, it was all full of wine trade. You thought, hang on, this wouldn't have happened 10 years ago. So the city itself is amazing. I mean, it's really live. It's very beautiful. The buildings are very historic. It's been a trading town, the city, for God knows how long. Then you charge up the right way. You can go down south to the Grave and Sauternes, really beautiful. Most people head north into the Médoc quite quickly. And you there is a wine route there. There are lots of chateaux that do open their doors. So you can book tastings now. You could go into the amazing village out at Lynch-Barge, which Jean-Charles has created. So there's a bakery there, there's a patisserie there. It's really charming and friendly in Pauillac, or just outside Pauillac. And you go further north to the amazing sort of Cols d'Estornel up the wine route there. And once you see these buildings, that brings it all alive. They are majestic. They're meant to be statements. That's why they were built. So they are incredible. I mean, they are incredible, but it does bring it alive. So when you see the label on the table, you'll go, oh, I can sort of picture that. And if you don't have, it's not easy to get into all of them, but those you can, it just brings it alive. And then another day you can head out to the right bank. And obviously everyone gravitates towards Saint-Émilion because it is one of the prettiest towns in France. It is full of restaurants again. It is full of tourists. It is probably one of the more beautiful parts of France. But in Saint-Émilion itself, lots of wine bars, lots of wine shops, lots of sort of formal places, but also casual places. So it's a really easy place to visit now. And, in Bordeaux itself, there is the Cité du Vin. So you can go and, you can go and have a wander around, and there's a museum there that tells you everything you need to know about the history of Bordeaux. So they have made it much more approachable, and, quite right too. They made it a real world-class center for wine. So I think for those of you who want a good holiday, go there to the city. Then you can go out to the beach. Arcachon is only about an hour and 15 minutes from the city center. You get rolling big waves. You get fantastic seafood. It's a completely different environment to the city itself. Quite wild, really quite beautiful. And if you want to then do another car trip, you can get in your car, go through Biarritz, another lovely place, have a whole lot of oysters, go further down, and then you hit San Sebastián, which of course is one of the great foodie capitals of the world. So, anybody who's got a week and wants to do a quick road trip, it's very easy to get to. And San Sebastián, I think, is just such a different city to Bordeaux, and it's foodie heaven there. And as you know, it's not just expensive. There are a lot of Michelin star restaurants there, but there are millions of places you can just drop into and have casual bites, which are completely wildly fantastic. You could tell that I quite like going there.
I adore anyone who has not been to San Sebastián. You cannot call yourself a foodie officially until you've been there, right?
There you go.
And I agree. The little streets where you just almost let your, what do they call it? It's more pinchos, isn't it, rather than tapas? You get one pinchos and you get a little glass of wine, and then go to the next bar, and then go to the next bar. Oh, it's brilliant.
Well, they all specialize in their own ones. Often they only have one pinchos. That's theirs. So it could be a tiny bit of delicious anchovy on toast, and nobody else does anchovy on toast. So then you go to the next one, which will do a little piece of Iberico ham or whatever it is. It's amazing.
It is fascinating. It's a bar crawl, but instead of it being beer, it's beautiful little pieces of food. Oh, I totally agree. Is there a chateau that you think that we're taking away the wine, ignoring the wine quality, but obviously it might be included anyway, that is the most breathtaking chateau with grounds, with parklands, manicured, that you think that so far is up there at the top?
Yeah, I mean, you can't help but sit down when you look up the driveway at Château Margaux. You just have to sit down because it's got an avenue of trees with this unbelievably classical building at the end. And you just got to go, wow. And you can get quite close to it. So it is something that, if you're interested in wine, if you love wine, it's just it's a must see. It's a must see. And then you get a little bit of estate envy, which of course no human being can normally do. And, I want to have that place, that's always what strikes me. So yeah. But there are others, like where I worked at Chateau Longo-Hallgarten, you go past it, it's utterly beautiful. It's perfectly in perspective, but there are lots and lots and lots of. I mean, they are, Cos d'Estenel. I mean, it's sort of mad. It's got turrets everywhere and great stonework, and it's got to be seen. It's got to be seen.
Okay, everyone, it's got to be seen. As we slowly sum up, I mean, we've talked about some of the wines you're bringing in and obviously why Bordeaux is so special. Is there something about the Cellar Series that I haven't asked you that everyone should know about, something that's important to you?
Well, this might sound a bit vain, but it's been a passion project. It's been a passionate project of mine, and I'm incredibly proud of how it's being adopted by the Hallgarten sales team. It's being more and more understood by the restaurateurs. To begin with, and you'll be very familiar with this. If I said, we've got this Cos d'Estenel, and they used to busy look on the internet, go, oh, it's 5p more expensive than I can buy it off a broker. Yeah, it is, but we're not ashamed about that because we know that the provenance is perfect. And the key thing is it often does taste that much better. So, we're winning the argument now. And that's very, very thrilling. It really is very thrilling. And hopefully you were kind enough to come to the tasting. Hopefully the next time we do it next year, there are a small number of very, very high-end chateaux that are lining up to join the program, which is, for me, utterly thrilling. I'm not going to tell you which they are, but they are world famous, and they are people we've been talking to for a while. But a number of them came to visit the tasting to have a look at how we do it, and they were like, "Oh my gosh, I better get involved in this. Otherwise, oh my gosh, we are missing a trick here." Because obviously they want to see their wines on tables, being enjoyed, being drunk by people who are out and about in hospitality.
I have such beautiful memories of that tasting, and I was only there for a very short period, literally a few hours. I got to try some Chateau Mouton Rothschild, which again, even working in the wine industry for 15 odd years and as a sommelier, I opened up one or two first growths here and there, but you might have a little taste quickly to make sure it tastes how it should. So you can give it to the customer, but you're not savoring it. You're rushing around. You're not there to sit and enjoy that. And to take my time, actually, this is the first time tasting a first growth where I could actually take a proper tasting note, think about it. And, do I have the money to be buying Mouton Rothschild? Sadly, no.
I get it.
But it really was head and shoulders above the rest in terms of quality.
Yeah, well, that's a fact of life, isn't it? And, but going back slightly to the beginning, Bordeaux isn't exclusive anymore. Yes, if you're privileged enough to have someone let you share some of the Feet or Mouton, brilliant. But there's plenty of other Bordeaux, and, life, it's right. You could say the same about lots of experiences. We have a business, as you might know, that supplies fine wines to super yachts. I can't go on a super yacht. I never will go on a super yacht. And, that's just a fact of life. But that doesn't mean you can't get on a little dinghy and enjoy the water. And, it's the same sort of analogy. So I think you just got to, your reaction was the same as a few others, actually. And, that is the privilege of doing this project, is I can put on those shows. So I would suggest you come back next year, because it's going to be hopefully the next step in the evolution.
Oh gosh. Okay. Anyone listening, if you are in, because we have a global audience, those of you in England and you're in the trade, you can come and attend the Cellar Series fine wine tasting.
Exactly.
Get it in the diary. I will put a link in the show notes, so and you can put it in the diary, or at least be vaguely familiar.
Or contact us, and we would
100%.
we would be very happy to chat and describe what we're doing in more detail, because, as I say, it's something of great personal interest to me, and now of great interest to a lot of people in Bordeaux. No,
I agree. I really fully support everything that's happening with Hallgarten and the way you're looking at working with producers.
You're sweet. Thank you very much.
No, hence why it's been so good to have you on the podcast, and you have so much to talk about and to offer. So everybody, yes, if you can, you're in the trade, get to the tasting next year. But if you're a consumer, imagine, there's still people, they're like, yeah, but we can't come to this, which... Yeah. Sorry. You are obviously, all of these wines which have provenance, that have traceability, are obviously available online. I know that Tannin and Oak, as a retailer online, has many of your wines, don't they? That for me, that's probably a good retailer to find a whole selection of wines from the Cru Bourgeois at £30. There's a beautiful Château Surac 2019. I used to sell Surac. I love them.
Yeah.
Used to be owned by Château Latour. It's always, I think, now it's Calon Sigur who looks after them, but they're £40.
It is, well done, yeah. 10 out of 10. You passed your exam to question.
Thank you. But we remember exams aren't important.
Yeah. Boom.
But for £40, this is a great Lalande de Pomerol. This is another example of wine that's not necessarily even from what's considered the top region, but it's got great people behind it. Maybe that's a tip. I don't know enough about Bordeaux, so this is not my speciality. But I do think, as a tip, which is sometimes knowing the hands behind, investigate the people, kind of follow that trail.
Hence
my
comment on Denis Durantou. So that was my little tip to your listeners, because the wines are brilliant and they're not expensive.
Yeah.
If you like silky, brilliantly made, really delicious wines, there's your go-to.
Perfect.
But, if one of my businesses is a retail business, Lane Wheeler, you can always contact us, and my team would be delighted to give you some help.
I don't know why I didn't even think about that. Of course, you've talked about Lane Wheeler. That is a pretty good place to start, isn't it? I will put all of the stuff in the show notes.
You're kind.
Is there anything else? Is there a leaving comment? Is there something that you haven't mentioned about Bordeaux that we need to think about?
I think you've asked really, the pertinent questions, as expected. I think my overriding view was, don't be shy, because you don't need to know a huge amount about it. You just got to be ready with your eyes open, and just know that the way wine is being made there is just so good compared to all the years ago, and trust it.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Michael. And
thank you for asking me on.
Let's share a glass of Bordeaux out of at least a magnum.
Yeah. That's just for you, or are we allowed to share that?
No, we can't share that. I'll speak to you soon.
Okay, take care.
Take care.
See you.
Okay, wine friends, so you already have some great value picks from Pomerol and Saint-Émilion on the right bank. But now I want to swing us back over to the left bank, to another place where you can find value. So in the Médoc, let's talk Cru Bourgeois, because this is one of those Bordeaux things that looks simple on the shelf, but is actually, should we call it a bit of a soap opera if you dig into it? Once you understand it, you're also, though, going to feel a little bit more confident grabbing a bottle. So first up, what does Cru Bourgeois actually mean? So think of Bordeaux as a very old social hierarchy. At the top, in the Médoc, you've got the famous 1855 classification, your first growths, second growths, all of that aristocratic world. But outside that system, there were hundreds of really good estates, serious vineyards, proper winemaking, just not invited to the main table. And this is where Cru Bourgeois comes in. So the word bourgeois basically refers to the town-based merchant class, but the people who weren't aristocracy, but still owned land, traded wine, built estates. So Cru Bourgeois is essentially the respected outsiders of the Médoc. Now here, the important bit most people don't realise, the idea has been floating around in some form since way back in the 15th century. It wasn't formal, but it existed socially. So a kind of informal recognition that certain non-aristocratic estates were still producing very good wine. Fast forward to 1855 and everything changes. Napoleon's famous classification comes along. 60 estates in the Médoc get elevated into Cru Classé status, and then that's it. Frozen in time. And what that meant in reality is quite important. Hundreds of Médoc producers were left out permanently. There's no promotion system, there's no movement, there's no way in. Well, apart from Mouton, but we'll get to that. So eventually, in 1932, something had to be done. The Bordeaux Chamber of Commerce and the Gironde Chamber of Agriculture, they came together and they created a Cru Bourgeois list. 444 estates were selected. It sounds official, but here's the twist. It was never fully enshrined into law. So instead of being a stable classification, it kind of floated around in a semi-official, slightly messy state. Some people used it, some didn't, and over time it became inconsistent. Then the Médoc itself goes through serious crisis, and this part matters. Between the Great Depression, World War II, and a run of poor vintages, the region shrinks massively. Vineyards are abandoned, estates disappear. By the 1960s, Médoc has gone from about 25,000 hectares down to around 6,500. So by 1966, there's another attempt to fix things. A syndicate revises Cru Bourgeois and introduces a hierarchy, including tiers like Cru Bourgeois Exceptionnel and Supérieur. But again, it's not properly legal. And crucially, some very respected estates are left out completely. Names like Sociando Malais, Gloria, Ferland Ségur, Chasse Spleen. These are serious wines, but they're outside the system. So already you've got a classification that doesn't fully match reality. Then in 1978, it's tweaked again, and we get the familiar structure. Cru Bourgeois, Supérieur, Exceptionnel. But the same problem remains. No real legal backbone, and still not everyone is included. By this point, something slightly chaotic has happened. Around 400 Médoc estates are using the term anyway, whether officially controlled or not. So the EU basically says, sort it out. And that leads us to the big 2003 overhaul. This was meant to be the reset. And to be fair, it was serious. Estates had to submit everything: vineyard details, winemaking practices, pricing, awards, press coverage, and multiple vintages from the 1990s. Then blind tastings were done. From 490 applicants, 247 estates were classified, including 9 Exceptionnel and 87 Supérieur. But Bordeaux being Bordeaux, it didn't end there. A group of estates who were excluded challenged the system in court, arguing conflicts of interest in the judging process, and the French courts agreed. By 2007, the classification was annulled completely, and even the use of the term Cru Bourgeois was temporarily banned. So imagine that, a classification that simply stops existing for a while. Then in 2010, it comes back, but this time it changes philosophy completely. Instead of a one-off historical ranking, it becomes a quality certification based on consistency. Estates now have to reapply and be assessed on performance over time, not just reputation. And since 2020, it becomes even more structured, again with the 3 tiers returning. Cru Bourgeois, Cru Bourgeois supérieur, Cru Bourgeois exceptionnel. But now there's a big shift. It's no longer just about tasting wine. They look at the full estate, viticulture, sustainability, environmental practices, winemaking, and long-term consistency. And instead of a single snapshot, it's reviewed over a 5-year period. So, why does all this matter? Because Cru Bourgeois today is actually one of the best places to find value in Bordeaux. You're often getting serious terroir, proper investment, and skilled winemaking, definitely without first growth pricing. But there's still one interesting tension in the system. Some of the Medoc's most famous outsider estates, the ones with huge reputations like Sociando Malais, never joined, or they left, or they simply chose independence. So Cru Bourgeois is always slightly incomplete. It's good, but it doesn't include everyone it arguably should. Well, that's kind of the story. A classification that kept trying to define quality, but kept running into the reality that Bordeaux is too complex, too political, and too proud to fit neatly into boxes. But today, at least, it works better than it ever has. So next time you see Cru Bourgeois on a label, don't think second tier. Think, this is Bordeaux trying finally to build a merit system that actually moves with time. And honestly, it only took a few centuries. Now, as always, I finish with a quote. And seeing as Bordeaux classification systems seem to come with almost as much drama, history, controversy, and evolution as the wines themselves, it feels only right to circle back to where this whole conversation started, because the episode really began after I was lucky enough to attend the Cellar Series, tasting many of the first and second growths, including Mouton Rothschild. So let's look at their original motto and then how they changed it. Now, no one send in any complaints on my terrible French, but the original motto of Mouton Rothschild was Premier ne puis, second ne daigneur, Mouton suis. This translates to first I cannot be, second I deign not to be, Mouton I am. So basically saying if we can't be first, we refuse to accept being second because we are Mouton. But then came 1973, the only change ever made to the 1855 classification. Mouton Rothschild was finally promoted to first growth. And naturally, they updated the motto. Premier, je suis. Second, je fus. Mouton ne change. First I am. Second I was. Mouton does not change. Now, next week, we are hopping across the pond to Washington State wines, a region I have completely fallen in love with, and somewhere producing some absolutely insane Cabernet Sauvignon. Have you heard of Red Mountain? Well, you will have by next week. And as I always say, if you are enjoying these episodes, getting value from them, learning something new, or traveling with me through the wine world, please take a second to leave a review on Apple Podcasts, leave a rating on Spotify or wherever you are listening. And please share the episode with a fellow wine lover, because all of this helps the podcast become more discoverable and means I can keep making more episodes like this. And finally, whether this week you are drinking the historic names, pulling something special from your cellar, opening an older vintage, or simply finding incredible value in Bordeaux, take time to pause, enjoy it, share it with somebody, and actually be in the moment. Until next week, wine friends, cheers to you.